Oh, hey everybody. Welcome back to MoodTube. I'm your host, Paul Malamud. What a crazy week in the NFL. I've said it before, there's more parity in the league than ever before. And that's never more apparent than a weekend of games like Week 3. I went a very disappointing 1-4 with my picks. Some things happened that I never would have expected. Like the 49ers getting straight embarrassed for the second week in a row, this time at home. And the Giants looking like a team trying to go downy for clowny. I'm still 15-10 so far with my picks this season, but last week was unacceptable, and I will be better. On a much brighter note, I'm now 2-0 in my Bet Moody games. I was on hand at Jet Life Stadium to see Gang Green win me the bet against Bills fan Ben Kaczynski. I don't think my voice is completely recovered from all the cheering, but luckily I don't have to find a way to beat Kenny Powers without dropping the F-bomb every 5 seconds. Any Eastbound and Down fan knows that's nearly impossible. The talk all week long has been how the Jets were one of the third team in NFL history to have 20 penalties and still find a way to win. I don't think that should be the story though. I think we should be talking about how the Jets offense got over 500 yards for the first time since 2000 against a Ravens team whose defensive line coach was one Rex Ryan. If Geno Smith and company can come close to replicating that kind of offensive output with the way the Jets defense is playing right now, there isn't a game on their schedule that they don't have a chance to win. And I'm not really worried about these penalties because I don't think NFL players want to be doing too many push-ups every day in practice. I talked about this last week with my guest Drew Smith, and watching Monday night's game, there's something that I'm finally ready to admit. I think that this Broncos offense may be the best offense in the history of the NFL. Not only is Peyton Manning playing better than ever before, but the weapons that John Elway has surrounded him with are just incredible. They have everything you want in an offense. A dynamic deep threat in Demaryius Thomas. A shifty slot possession receiver in Wes Welker. A sure-handed guy to go across the middle in Eric Decker. And one of the most dangerous tight ends in the entire game, Julius Thomas. Not to mention the fact they've got enough good running backs that they can actually hold a three-way rock, paper, scissors tournament to determine who gets their goal line carries. And I think the scariest thing of all is that Payne was right when in his post-game presser, he said that they were leaving points on the field. There were drops on third down and they fumbled the ball away a couple of times. Once this team truly gets going into midseason form, I'm scared for any defense that has to try to stop them. And speaking of defenses, with a new and improved Saints defense, I think that the game for everybody to circle on their calendars that will ultimately determine who gets home field advantage in the NFC is the Monday night matchup on December 2nd between the Saints and the Seahawks in Seattle. Will Sean Payton and Drew Brees get revenge against Pete Carroll and Beast Mode Lynch for their embarrassing playoff loss a few years ago? The answer, I think, is going to determine who gets to sleep in their own beds throughout the playoffs. Lastly, I've got to admit things when I'm wrong. And the Dolphins seem to be the real deal. It's still very early, and we have to see how the Pats look once they get Gronk and Amendola back. But with the Dolphins' defense and the way Tannehill is spreading the ball around, right now, I think the Dolphins have to be the favorite to win the AFC East. Granted, they still have to actually be able to find a way to beat the Pats. Now, for this week's Ask Moody. The first question deals with these struggling 49ers. Do you think that defensive coordinators are starting to better understand how to game plan against Kaepernick? If yes, how do the 49ers fix this problem so that they can attempt to make another run this year? Well, defensive coordinators are doing a better job of playing press man coverage to shut down the 49ers' receiving weapons. But I think it's more about what the 49ers aren't doing than what these defenses are doing. I think the 49ers need to get back to their true identity of a hard-nosed, smash-mouth football team that wants to run the ball down your throat. They need to ride Frank Gore. Then that will open up the running lanes for Colin Kaepernick. And then the passing game will be allow them to do what they need to do. The receivers will be able to get their space. So I think the 49ers this week, in a game against the Rams where they want revenge for their overtime loss last year and their tie against the Rams last year, I think they're going to come out and run the ball down their throat, and I like the 49ers to bounce back. I think they still have a very good chance of getting the wild card, but with that embarrassing loss, I think that may have cost them a shot at the division title. Next question, do you think Terrelle Pryor is the real deal? It's still early to say, but I think he may be. He's one of the most exciting running quarterbacks in the NFL, and his arm's electric. He can throw the ball deep, and he's got a cannon. And more importantly, he's accurate. But the Raiders have absolutely no weapons around him. I think if the next few years the Raiders can actually build a respectable offense around Terrelle Pryor, then they may have just found the answer at quarterback that they've been looking for since Rich Gannon. And lastly, which 0-3 team, if any, do I think has the best shot of making the playoffs? Well, the only two teams with a shot at all are the Giants and Redskins, but that's because they play in the worst division in football. I think the Cowboys are going to end up running away with the division, and there's no wild card coming out of the NFC East this year, but they're still alive. I think the Giants need to win this week in Kansas City, or else you can stick a fork in them. I think the Redskins are going to come out and beat the Raiders, but I don't see either of them making the playoffs, so my answer is no. So that's it for this week's Ask Moody. If you have questions that you want answered, make sure to send them to moodsportstips@gmail.com. Again, that's moodsportstips@gmail.com. Now for some favorable fantasy matchups for Week 4. I'm going to do this every week, and I'm not just going to give you the matchups of the all-stars who put up points every week. I'm going to try to give you the under-radar players who are going to possibly have the chance of making the difference between you winning or losing. This segment is brought to you by GTS Clothing, aka Greater Than Sports. At receiver, I think Torrey Smith is going to have a big week against the Bills. The Bills have a depleted secondary, and as we saw last week against the Jets, they are very vulnerable to the deep ball. Torrey Smith this year has been running more diverse routes, but he's made his bones in this league as a deep threat, and I think he's going to get back to that this week, and I think he'll finally find his way into the end zone. Now, for running backs, I like any Colts running back this week. As the season goes on, Trent Richardson is going to get more and more of the carries, but as we saw against the 49ers, it's still a timeshare. Especially this week, since they're playing against the Jaguars, it doesn't matter if you have Richardson or Ahmad Bradshaw, you should play them. I think they both could see double digits since the Colts are going to be up by 3 scores before halftime. And lastly, at quarterback, I like Tony Romo against the Chargers. The Bolts are giving up the most fantasy points to quarterbacks so far this season, and I think Romo's going to continue that trend. I'm looking for him to score somewhere in the mid-20s. Now, for this week's picks. First, I'm taking the Ravens over the Bills, with the Ravens giving up 3.5 points. The Bills looked bad last week and were only allowed to win the game because of the Jets' penalties. I mean, not allowed to win the game, but stay in the game because of the Jets' penalties. The Ravens looked much better last week, and I think they're going to come out and trounce the Bills. The next game, so I'm taking the Ravens giving up 3.5 over the Bills. Next game, I'm taking the Bengals giving up 5 points over the Browns. The Browns found a way to win last week, but they're not playing the Vikings this week. The Bengals are going to come out and trounce them. I think they may be the second best team in the AFC. Their offense is great. I think A.J. Green's going to have a great week in fantasy, and I think their defense is going to just hit their full stride that they've been building up to, and I think they're going to steamroll the Browns. This might be a 30-3 game. We will see. I'm taking the Bengals giving up 5 points to the Browns. Next game, I'm taking the Colts giving up 9.5 to the Jaguars. The Jaguars are the NFL's punching bag this year, and they're going to be seeing big spreads each week. And most weeks, it's worth taking the favorites. This is one of those weeks. The Colts looked great last week. They seem to be hitting their stride, and I think they're going to steamroll the Jaguars. Next game, I'm taking the Giants +5 over the Chiefs. I'm going out on a big limb here. The Giants were horrible last week. They were 0-3, but they're a team with a lot of talented, prideful players. They've got a great coach in Tom Coughlin. I think they're going to come out and come together and win this hard game on the road. Kansas City's a great team, but they're not going to go undefeated, and I think this week they're going to lose. I'm taking the Giants +5 over the Chiefs. And lastly, I'm taking the Patriots getting 2.5 over the Falcons. Last week, Tom Brady had much better chemistry with his young wide receivers, and there's a pretty good chance that Gronk's going to be playing this week. If that's the case, I like them over the Falcons with their injury issues. I'm going to take the Pats getting 2.5 on the road. Now for this week's Bet Moody. After my Jets led me to 2-0, I'm continuing to put my faith in Rex Ryan's defense. I don't think Jake Locker, Chris Johnson and company are going to be able to score enough points to be able to beat the Jets. This week, I'm betting against Titans fan Matt Gomey. And if by some chance the Jets lose this game, then I'm going to be doing next week's MoodTube dressed up as a cowboy. And at the end of the episode, I'm going to treat you all to the fine melody of Hit Me Baby One More Time. Thanks for tuning in to Week 4 of MoodTube. Make sure to check back next week to see if I have to channel my inner pop star. But in the meantime, make sure to check out the tube, because you got to see Mood.